Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Bitch in My Brain podcast. My name is Josie, and once again, every single week, you'll probably hear me say this, I'm excited to be back with you. It is my highlight of the week to be able to sit down and record these episodes and kind of decompress on feelings that I'm having as well as feelings that other people are having. I think the universe is pointing towards the topic I want to discuss this week. And I'm picking up its signal based on last week's episode, specifically on my social media. I uploaded a post saying, I'm the most selfish person you've ever met. I love it about myself. And so I uploaded it as a little, fun kind of teaser, maybe to get people interested. And maybe 2 hours later from posting, I had an absolute panic attack because there were these profiles that commented on my post. And one of them was like, this is not a flex. And then the other one was like, I can't tell if this is a bit or not. And immediately I was like, oh my gosh, should I delete this post? I was freaking out because that was the first time I guess I'd had kind of negative energy around my comments. I don't know. It made me nervous. And I truly think it was two guys. I truly think it's because selflessness was not as ingrained in men as it was in women or is in women. So the misunderstanding of what I was trying to say, it didn't shock me that it was men who raised the alarm. But, that really gets me thinking of how ingrained selflessness is in women and how it really stirs up a lot of our people-pleasing ways because we've grown up to be, selfless, and that's been really pushed. People-pleasing almost, it comes naturally to us. So that's one reason I want to kind of talk about people-pleasing. That's the topic of the day. And then I had my friend who I texted, because I texted some of the girls, and this is also what I want you guys to do. I want to make sure that these topics feel relevant. They're things that other women are dealing with right now. So I kind of polled a few of my friends. I said, what's coming up? What have you been struggling with? All of that. And the first text I got back was people pleasing. And I was like, the universe, she always has a plan. So that is why I'm very excited today to dig into people pleasing, because it feels right, and being a people pleaser isn't all that it's cracked up to be. So that being said, let's jump in. So if you find yourself to be someone who always says yes to everything, you're super go with the flow to a fault, you don't make your opinions heard, you don't speak up, or you feel responsible for other people's emotions or feelings, or you self-blame in situations that you shouldn't. You take responsibility in situations that you shouldn't to, avoid conflict or to make things easier for the other person or more comfortable for the other person, then you are in fact a people pleaser. Welcome to the club. We do not have jackets, but if they did, they would be fully embroidered. And although I'm being kind of playful with it, people pleasing is actually a really sabotaging thing to have in our lives. And it's so funny because a lot of people, we really take a lot of pride in people pleasing. We almost feel like it's the best trait to have. However, the truth is, people pleasing can also be very detrimental. And there's a few nuances in people pleasing that are really interesting. And I'm excited to really explore why we're so connected to being people pleasers and ultimately how to stop being one. That's kind of really what my goal is with this episode is really to shine a light on who people pleasers are, why they do what they do, and why women are impacted so much more than men. And I teased that at the beginning of the episode, but I want to dive into that a little bit deeper. So similar to almost all inner work is it starts in our childhood. We begin to get these messages from, our observations of the outside world, society, our parents, caregivers, schools, friends, all of it. And specifically when it came to girls, the messaging we got is be nice, care for others. And a big one that, sticks, I think, to a lot of us is good girls do what they're told. And it's no surprise. Now they recently in 2022, did a survey putting men and women up against each other on whether or not they identify as people pleasers. And, the data didn't lie. It was about 60% of women identified as being a people pleaser and about 40% of men identified as being a people pleaser. So there's definitely a disparity in those two metrics. And it's a lot about how we grew up and how boys, they were supposed to be the strong, tough leaders that, bulldoze through things to get things done. And so I think good girls, doing what they're told was in a way kind of a detriment to us. And I get that that was probably a parenting technique to get kids to listen to what you're saying. So I can empathize with that, or I can understand, but for all the moms or parents or dad, if dads are listening to this, let's retire it because when taken out of context can ultimately do more harm than good to us women, to us girls. So let's move that into retirement. And then for those of us who have already experienced that sort of language, that sort of messaging, we're gonna rewire our brain and kind of work our way out of that mindset or that belief. And that kind of flows into what people-pleasing tendencies are. And really, it's a deeper emotional issue because people-pleasing usually starts when we're seeking something externally. So we're looking for a way that we can feel loved or accepted or safe in some circumstances. So it's really tied into our self-worth. A lot of us have kind of a entangled relationship between our self-worth and our people-pleasing. And that's also because our people-pleasing desires are really kind of rooted in our need for validation, to get gold stars, because that's what makes us feel good. That's what makes us feel safe. That's what makes us feel loved. That's what makes us feel supported. So chasing those gold stars and that validation you need externally takes a hit out of your self-worth. And ladies, self-worth is our most impactful, potent kind of superpower. When we really step into our self-worth and inherently know that we are worthy, we are capable of anything. So that is why self-worth is such a huge part of this, and that is why people-pleasing and putting others first can really sabotage us. So when you look at your people-pleasing ways, bring a little bit of awareness to the intention behind your people-pleasing. Because a lot of us, and like I kind of said before, we take a lot of pride in being people pleasers. And we think of it as a very, generous act. When in reality, and you might be triggered by this, it's actually a selfish act. And I know we talked last week about embracing selfishness. I don't want you to think that this, cancels this out. But the selfishness is kind of rooted in the fact that there's a personal payoff for you being a people pleaser. You're getting something in return. So it's not really this act of generous service. You're helping others. that can be true. That can be a part of it. Both things can exist. But you're also looking for something else. You're looking for a pat on the back. You're looking for a payoff. And that's kind of where, and I love this topic, and I'll talk about it on a future podcast, but it's the narcissism of an empath, of us wanting to save someone to make ourselves feel good. Or, we feel like we have to be the rescuer. And that payoff from that is, we feel good about ourselves. So it's kind of ironic that our people-pleasing can be rooted in selfishness, but it's the truth. It really is the truth. And I'm not saying it's bad to be a people-pleaser. I don't want that to come off as to, not help other people or, anything like that. I just think it's important for us to bring our awareness to the intentions behind our actions, especially when they have the potential to sabotage us. I am very familiar with my people-pleasing ways sabotaging me, especially around work. I was a yes man. I would literally say yes to anything and everything, no matter how much I didn't want to do it, no matter how much I didn't have the time to do it, no matter how much I absolutely hated the task. No was not in my vocabulary. It was strictly yeses. And although in some ways that benefited me for a while, there were definitely times of chaos that I welcomed in because of my inability to say no, because of my inability to handle someone else being disappointed. And this was so deeply ingrained into me. And I think that's because, especially around work, in the context of work, my parents were very hardworking growing up. And there was a lot of pride in being a hard worker. And it was very much like a trait that was put on kind of a pedestal, essentially. And that kind of expectation of being a hard worker led me to get my first job. I think it was like 13. I was washing dishes at a wine bar for, who knows, like $10 an hour, and I'd work, 2 hours or whatever. But it gave me a little bit of that validation I was seeking for my parents of like, oh, wow, I'm so young starting a job and this independence and all of that. So the idea of working was just, it was just ingrained in me. And I think that's why as I got older, especially in college, I worked so many jobs all at the same time, which in some ways had its benefits. But I would say in a way it created a monster, especially as I got to the later years of college when I was working more kind of professionally with people. And those people I worked with sang my praise. Like I have still an amazing network in Boulder that had a huge impact on the success of my freelance business. So in a way, me being a yes man, it was in service of some things. However, because I couldn't get out of that cycle and I continued to be a yes man even after I had built my network, it beat me up in later years. It beat me up, as I progressed in my career, built my business, started working with other clients. It didn't have the payoff that was worth kind of the pain I was feeling from always saying yes, from being a people pleaser, making sure that everyone's okay, even at my expense, all of it. And ultimately, the more you people please and the more you say yes to things you don't want, resentment builds. Resentment follows people pleasing very closely. And all it takes is a little switch for you to move from feeling like you're doing something good to wanting to say, fuck you, essentially. And so I have a very good example of where my people-pleasing turned into anger and resentment. So in college, one of my jobs is I was a personal assistant, and a lot of my tasks had to do with like mailing, shipping things out, all of that. So my boss had gotten something shipped in, and I guess it was a little pricier to ship it into Boulder, so he decided to ship it in to Cheyenne, Wyoming. And then he asked if I would be able to go pick it up. I did not want to do it at all. Like, it was the last thing I wanted to do. It was on a weekend, so it was like, I want to hang out with my friends. I don't want to work. I work for you throughout the week. But because I was incapable of disappointing them, I was like, yep, I'll do it. And so I brought my boyfriend with me. I was like, there's no way I'm doing this alone. So I had to bring a partner. And we drive all the way up to Wyoming. It's probably about an hour and a half drive, pick up the packages, and we're headed on our way back. While we're driving, we're on I-25, which is like a vertical the big vertical highway that runs through Colorado, like into Wyoming, New Mexico, all of that. It is my least favorite highway. There's something about it. I hate it. Ugh, I'm not about it. As we're driving back, all of a sudden this big like thunderstorm hits and rain is just pouring down. Like, I swear there was 2 inches of rain in 2 minutes. And it was so sporadic that the highway was immediately wet. As we're driving, all of a sudden we start to hydroplane. And so we're, fishtailing this way, that way. And all of a sudden we're literally going sideways, probably at like 50 miles an hour. I'm not even kidding you. Through the median, the big grass median, onto the other side of the highway. And we shot a gap. I don't even know how to describe it. There was a big truck coming, and then there was like a smaller white car. And we shot the gap just perfectly enough. And the white car clipped my fog light out, but that was it. Like, there was no damage, thank God. But we ended up on the other side of the highway, like in kind of a little ditch thing by the frontage road. And we sat in silence for 20 minutes or so. And I think the first words out of our mouth were like, what the fuck just happened? It was wild. And it was one of those like situations where it was probably 30 seconds long, but felt like the longest time of my life. I genuinely thought we were going to die. And I'm sure the other cars around us were kind of thinking the same thing. So once I kind of calmed down enough, I mean, clearly I'm still a little adrenaline just sharing the story, but I remember immediately being pissed at my boss and being so angry that he had asked me to do this errand, that he just wanted to, save money, so he made me do it. Like, I am very, very upset about this. And I sent him, a text, and I was like, and I probably should have waited maybe 5 minutes, but I was just like, I'm not doing this again. Like, in a way, it was kind of like I snapped. And looking back, my anger was directed at him, but in a way, I should have been more so angry at myself, because I had the opportunity to tell them no. I had the opportunity to say, you know what, I can't do that. It's not something I'm available for. I had all those opportunities to say no. And then when something like this happens, I fall into victim mode, like he or they did this to me, when in reality, I did it to myself. So that's kind of an example about how our people pleasing can actually lead to resentment, to anger, to frustration, and make you act out in ways that you might not intend to. Your people pleasing ways, you want to be, the good human, the nice human, the one that cares for other people, helps other people. But in reality, because of your desire to be that, you actually turn into this. So it's, once again, it's that irony of, you think you're doing good, but you're setting yourself up for bad. It's truly the definition of self-sabotage. So now that I've talked about almost physically dying, I thought, why not talk about when I was mentally dying, parentheses, inside. So really the mental pain around my people pleasing skyrocketed when I started my freelance business because I had the mindset that the client comes first, always. Whatever they need, that is a priority. Get it to them as quick as you can, no excuses. And I think a lot of that was my need to show my value, how good of a worker I am, avoid if they were to leave me. Like, I didn't want any conflict. I wanted it to be easy, and I wanted to be the person that made it easy for them. So that's where my ego came in a little bit, a lot of it. But in a way, it was also me trying to avoid any shame or disappointment. So saying yes to everything and doing it quickly was how I set myself apart, or was how I built their trust in me, and ultimately kept them hooked and working for me. And I was always ready. I was like, if you need me to problem solve, I will problem solve. I'll figure out a solution. We'll implement it. Done. Okay, what's on the next list? Like, I was, like I just said, the rescuer, and that was what I needed for my self-worth, essentially, because as I learned from my parents, being hardworking meant you're doing something right, meant that I was on the right path. But it was so important to me to make sure my client was happy at all costs, which came at a cost for me and my happiness and peace of mind, all of that. And ultimately, in a way, it almost killed me. And the crazy part is, it almost killed me 6 months ago. I know, not that long ago. But as I mentioned, we're recovering, okay, people? It's not perfect yet. We're working in that direction. So 6 months ago, I basically had a mental breakdown. I was so overworked. I was so stressed out. And I literally felt like I was drowning. One of the clients I was working with, we were consistently launching new programs. We were creating new projects, doing different types of content, different marketing collateral, all of that. And I was a one-man team. I was her, go-to marketing person. So I held a lot of the responsibilities for the launching of these programs. And that was, half the reason why I felt as though I couldn't, or I always had to say yes to things, because in my head, if I don't do it, who's going to do it? I'm the marketing person, and if this is a piece of the marketing puzzle, then, that's my responsibility. I need to figure it out. Even though I was drowning, dying, couldn't handle anything else, I would say yes because I didn't want that. I didn't want to disappoint her, or I didn't want to put a roadblock in the success of a campaign. So yes was my favorite word. It truly was. Well, I wouldn't say favorite. It was not my favorite word because there were times that I hated that word. I would say it was my most instinctual word. And then the other reason that I was such a people pleaser with this client and would say yes and wouldn't want to disappoint was because I had her on a little bit of a pedestal. She was someone that I didn't want to let down. I really valued her opinions and advice and everything in between. So I felt if I didn't do things that there would be shame around it, and maybe she wouldn't like me anymore, or all of these kind of things that were bubbling up to the surface, essentially, because it was almost like I needed it from her. That was because there were times where I did get that from her. I did get the, awesome work. This is so amazing. Great job. All of the accolades, all of the gold stars. And that felt good. That was very empowering for me. And I'm a positive reinforcement girly anyway. So that's like double great for me when they're telling me, great job, Josie, or giving me, a gold star. So the thought of experiencing that felt way better than the thought of experiencing shame or disappointment if I were to have said no. And this was my mindset for pretty much the entire time I was working with this client. And it reached a point where I then began to feel resentful because of my stress, because of my overwhelm, because I was saying yes to everything. I was, in a way, constantly bitching about it, or I would be crying, or if I was with a friend and we were catching up on some topic, I would somehow be able to relate it back to my job. Like, it was the only thing I could think of. It was the only thing I could speak about. And the overwhelm and stress were really like the only things that I could feel. And then really the day came where I almost had no choice but to kind of address the situation, because I couldn't keep working like that. And I reached a point I couldn't keep pushing myself to this limit. It was self-harm in a sense. And one day I had a session with one of my coaches, and I'm bawling my eyes out, and I look at them and I say, the only thing I want to do right now is walk off the side of a cliff. All I could envision when I went into my internal world was just the peaceful feeling of stepping off and being in midair and it being silent and not having anything to stress about. I was seeking that relief. I know that sounds really intense, but visually, that was all I could imagine. And once that came clear, where I understood that my only escape out of this darkness is to put myself first. And instead of saying yes to them, I need to start saying yes to myself. And so I knew that I had to leave. And as I was leaving, I had a meeting, and I expressed that I was feeling stressed. I was feeling beyond overwhelmed. And I told them, I said, I've worked every single Sunday for the past year. I have not had a true weekend. I am spending majority of my time either working on your content or thinking about your content. And I can't keep working every single Sunday. And their response was an interesting one. Their response was, well, I didn't ask you to do any of that. And I remember thinking two things the moment I heard that. The first one was kind of like, okay. Like, that's kind of a interesting thing to tell someone when they've basically explained that they've given their, blood, sweat, and tears, well, more so time, energy, and tears to your business. So that was when I heard, I didn't ask you to do that. I was a little offended. I was like, okay, that's kind of a fuck you in a different way. But then I realized the other side to it, and that shit, they were right, because they didn't ask me to work on Sundays. There was never an explicit email or expectation to work on Sundays. I'm the one that made that choice to work on things over the weekend. And I'm the one who decided to try to avoid that discomfort of something not being done or not hitting a deadline. So as much as, I said earlier where you're thrown off, like, I never asked you to do that. It really is true. It was me and my people-pleasing ways, my desire to get validation from them, to earn a gold star for being a hard worker, all of that. And so after really stepping away and looking at that situation, I noticed how important it is that I nip this behavior in the bud. Like, I need to stop this. So after I quit, I remember talking to so many people who didn't even know the situation. They just knew that I had left, and they would tell me, like, it's crazy the amount of people that told me, oh my gosh, Josie, you have color again in your face. Your aura is brighter. You actually look happy. Hearing that validated me in the sense of the things I already knew. I knew that I was losing pieces of myself with every yes that I said. And it highlighted the importance of putting yourself first and not feeling the need to manage everyone else and make sure everyone else is good, because that's what was killing me. That's what was causing me so much pain. And that is no longer acceptable to me. I have learned, maybe not learned my lesson, but I've seen it. It's like a movie screen of where I can go back through all of these events and experiences, and I can see the way my people-pleasing sabotaged me, and I no longer have the capacity for that. I care about myself way too much to continue people-pleasing and giving parts of myself away. And I want this for you guys as well. So I thought I would give you just two. We're going to keep it easy, kind of beginner tips on how to start addressing your people-pleasing ways and ultimately creating new behaviors or patterns that will make this journey of moving from, a current people pleaser into a recovering people pleaser. So the first and very important one, as well as one that can easily be implemented, is building in a pause. A lot of us, after we get a request, we feel as though we need to immediately answer yes. We need to immediately respond to what they're asking for, which means a lot of us instinctually just answer yes. We haven't even taken the time to think about if something's possible, if you have the bandwidth, before we sign ourselves up for it. So building in that pause allows you to take a step back of the situation and check in with yourself first before you respond. And what I've found to be really easy, honestly, kind of like a script, is I'll get back to you later on that, or I'm not quite sure what that day looks like, so let me follow up, and then I'll send you an email or give you a phone call, shoot you a text, that sort of thing. So when you're building in that pause, you're basically, I like to say, kind of buying yourself some time to really figure out if it's something that's in alignment, if it's something that feels right or works out. And who doesn't want a little time to marinate on things? So building in the pause, that's very, very important. And I do want to mention a lot of the times, and especially me, this is something I found in myself, I knee-jerk yes. I immediately answer yes because I become uncomfortable in silence. And I feel the need to fill that space. And I fill that space 95% of the time with yes. So I invite you to get comfortable in that discomfort. And the more you do it, the more you build in that pause, the more comfortable the discomfort will be. So build in the pause, get comfortable in the silence, and you'll truly take back the power to make your own decisions that are in alignment with what you want, you need, desire, all of that. The next one is getting comfortable saying no. And the word no is foreign, close to foreign, for our people pleasers. That is a word that tastes like vinegar, that feels like you're going to vomit if you say it. It's not a word we like to use. but it's also a very necessary word for us to use, and that's why we've got to get comfortable with it. I found it was easiest to start implementing no in kind of micro events or micro actions. Saying no to something, big, or like an invite to a wedding or stuff like that, that felt a little too big of a chunk to start out with. An easy one that comes to mind is you get a text from your friend group that's saying, hey, let's go eat at this restaurant, or let's go get this type of food. As people pleasers, we don't want to rock the boat or cause any roadblocks. So a lot of the times we'll just say, sure, I'm cool with whatever, even though you hate that restaurant or you don't like that type of food, but you're saying yes to go with the flow. And 90% of the time I've done this, the bill comes out and it's like $90 fucking. I hated this place and now I'm paying friggin' $100. So there's a time, my direct example of it sabotaged me. In this situation, now how I would operate it or how I would navigate it is if I received that text message, I would say, I'm happy to go out that night. However, I don't like that type of food. What are your thoughts on going to XYZ? And so I'm able to say no, but I'm also being proactive in the sense of I'm giving more options. I'm showing them the direction that I want to go in without it being like, no, I'm not going there. We all know what it's like to have that one person in the group that's a little sassy. And here's the thing, when we say no, we can say everything, every single thing in life with grace and gratitude. So you do not have to be like a blunt no unless it's necessary, unless it fits the situation, then, you do you. But if you're worried about stepping on people's toes or disappointing, find a way to word it that feels good for you, because then you get both of your needs met. You're finding safety in the fact that you're not causing more conflict or you're not causing any conflict, but you're also getting your needs met. So being able to say no, being comfortable with it, is a great starting point to kind of rewire your instinctive yes man mentality. So all of that being said, I hope you go into this week with a little curiosity and look for times, situations, or certain people that you find yourself needing to people please, and really kind of log those in your brain of, okay, when this person asks for this, I immediately want to say yes, or I immediately fear this, or whatever it is. But just bring awareness to where you find yourself instinctually going into that people-pleasing mode. As well as if you find yourself in those situations, challenge yourself even for 3 seconds to build in the pause and see how that makes you feel, and if that helps you kind of feel back in power over your time, your energy, all of that. So I encourage you this week, get comfortable saying no, build in the pause, and you're on your way to being a recovering people pleaser. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I will see you next time. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope this episode spoke to you, and I can't wait to continue to share so much more. If you're feeling called, please subscribe and leave a review so together we can reach even more women who deserve to live their best life. And you can follow me on social at The Bitch in My Brain as I share my journey and life in real time. I can't wait to see you bitches next week. Take care.